So next we're going to move into the topic of winning with technology innovation. And to lead this panel, Ricardo Barta, CIO of DHL Global Forwarding of Americas, also recently was on the board as well. He's been a great friend to HITEC for a long time, somebody that I consider a good friend. We connected a long time ago in one of my first events, and we got on a topic of big data at the time, and we've maintained that dialogue, I think, for quite a while. But Ricardo is a SVP, Chief Information Officer of DHL Global Forwarding Americas. Prior to this role, Ricardo served as a Chief Architect and Global Head of IT Strategy for the consumer business at GlaxoSmithKline, based out of Philadelphia. If you know Ricardo, he's always focused on opportunities to drive innovation and create business value. He's been named to the Hispanic Engineer and Information Technology magazine as the most influential Hispanics in technology in 2011. He's a multiple HITEC 100 winner, a big friend to the HITEC board, and is quite involved in many, many other communities, and part of what we call the Peruvian Mafia. So Ricardo, please join us and welcome.
All right. Testing, check. Am I in? Yes, I am. All right, guys. So, Jesse, thank you very much. That part of Peruvian Mafia, I think, is questionable, but we are a bunch of Peruvians here, so it's all good. I have a real pleasure to actually introduce to you folks on this panel that is about winning with technology and basically understanding what digitalization or digitization, you can choose your own term, means for leaders that are changing their own space in the business. So we're going to have a very active panel. I want to introduce first Miriam Hernandez, now as part of actually our HITEC board. Buenos días, Miriam. Next, I want to get Arjuna Rivera, who is part of Lockheed Martin. He manages EBS infrastructure and international labs and lead for principal researchers. So welcome, Arjuna.
Yeah, thank you.
Am I saying your name right? Arjuna?
Arjuna,
Arjuna, ¿verdad? Gracias. And then we have Enrique Ortegon, GM Caribbean and Spanish-speaking America Salesforce. That means basically the Caribbean, no Brazil, but anything going down from Mexico down to the Punta del Fuego in Chile. ¿Cómo estás? How are you? So before we go into the introductions, because I want you guys to get to know each of these panelists, I want to give you a little bit of context, right? And in order to do that, imagine for a moment today. Each of us have a business. Our business, by definition, and there is no other alternative, will be disrupted. Every business is a digital business. Every business is a digital business. If we are not willing, able, ready, and knowledgeable about what it means to do transformation into the digital world, we're out of luck. And I think it's very important that we as leaders realize that, and more importantly, understand what it takes to make it a reality within your own organizations. So to actually start the panel, I would like to get each of my panelists, colleagues here, to actually give a little bit of introduction as to who they are, where they come from, and their own business space. Let's start with Arjuna.
Great, good morning, and thank you. So Arjuna Rivera from Lockheed Martin, based out of Washington, D.C. I support the enterprise business services, so we're our primary IT organization across all of the Lockheed Martin Corporation. And specifically, my charter within a principal researcher and senior manager is to see how we can disrupt IT, or traditional IT, if you will, within Lockheed Martin. So I'm very looking forward to being on this panel and talking about innovation.
I'm Miriam Hernandez Keiko, and I'm managing partner at KPMG. I have responsibility across globally for all of the consulting that we do in the front and middle office, systems, people, process, disruptive technologies across all industries. So that's what I do.
Hi. Well, first of all, hi, good morning. It's a
Morning.
pleasure to be here. My name is Enrique Ortegon. I look over our customers and our operations in the Caribbean and Spanish-speaking Americas for Salesforce. And as Ricardo was saying, it's basically everything but Brazil. So, and I'm really excited. I think this digital transformation challenge is a conversation that I'm having more and more often in Latin America, definitely at the top of the CEO's agenda, and has led to some very fascinating conversations that start at technology but go so much further beyond what technology actually is and what does that mean? What does digital transformation means for these businesses? And I think we're going through a very exciting time in Latin America when it comes to this digital transformation age we're about to enter. I'm also very happy to see some familiar faces in the audience, so I'm sure the good questions and the easy questions are going to come from them.
Very good. All right. So we're going to dive into it, right? And the first topic of discussion for us, I'm going to take it in three parts, right? The first one is about how do we lead digitalization and transformation in our businesses, right? And let's look at that from our own perspectives. We have Enrique that looks at the edge of our sales cycles, right? That looks at sales effectiveness, that looks at how you harvest information for category management to understand really how you sell your products correctly, how you manage your sales force, how you basically do field management. There's a tremendous thing that we got to do in order to be top line. My friend Miriam is going to look at this thing from the perspective of a global operations advisory that KPMG does. And then we're going to go into one of the companies that actually produces some of the most sophisticated weapons around the world, from the stealth planes to basically bringing technology and research and value to the Department of Defense in many, many countries. But let's set the stage. Today, we are in a world where we have tremendous amount of access, ubiquitous computing, ubiquitous network, the cloud, the mobility, the IoT aspects of it, for instance, right? IoT today with LoRa allows you to have a device at the lowest price point that that we could ever have to manage before. You can buy a device that is actually $12, $15, $10. The one battery is going to last 5 years, right? And it's going to use a minimum amount of actual data transmission, and it's going to be basically one of those things that can measure shock, temperature, vibration. Imagine the potential where you can basically connect for the first time everything. Then we have big data. Big data that is going to allow us to harness all of this information and create insightful perspectives, not just the reactive or the prescriptive. We go to the prescriptive with AI. And then for a moment, if you look at mobility, everybody can say that you can build an app for $20,000, $25,000, and it's true. You can build apps. But these apps need to work in the context of enterprise architecture. It has to understand the new. It needs to understand RESTful APIs. It needs to understand how you connect the new to the old so you can create the new value propositions for almost every business. So let's set the stage. How you guys lead digital transformation within your own businesses. Let's start with Miriam.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I have sort of an inside perspective and an outside perspective.
Right.
I'm afraid that we're probably much more progressive in the way we advise our clients on how to do this transformation than maybe we are about transforming ourselves in a quick enough manner. But I'll say more about that in a moment. I think for us, we've been on this transformation path and guiding our clients through either functional transformation, industry transformation. I think that was mentioned by the last panel. Not only are we seeing transformation within functions and within businesses, but really industries, there are completely different because of technology. There's disruptors coming at our clients all the time. And for us, we believe very strongly that it starts with a business imperative, not with technology, but that technology has to enable everything. And that in a world where the business units can decide how they build $20,000 apps, the CIOs and IT need to get a lot smarter about how they become a change agent and disrupt themselves. So we spend a lot of time with our clients. We have a framework we called Connected Enterprise, and we use that as a way to really target what are the business imperatives in the front, middle, and back office. What are the connection points? Because one thing we find today, and I'm sure all of you do too as you service your own clients internally, is that the middle office has been overlooked for a long time. And in this world of digital transformation, I think we're going to get to the point when we talk transformation, it just means digital. But in this world of digital transformation, the middle office has been the spaghetti of trying to feed the front end to the end user, to the end customer. And now the chickens are coming home to roost. I think that's the saying. I get my sayings a little mixed up sometimes. English is my second language, so sometimes I get them confused. But what I mean by that is no longer can we sort of just, put wrappers on top of wrappers,
Right.
build things around it. We got to fix the middle office if enterprises are actually going to compete with new entrants, because the cost is prohibitive otherwise. So we spend a lot of time on that whole transformation of getting the middle office up to a snuff and cost effective, and optimize that in order to continue to serve whatever that enterprise's end customer promises. So we think that's very critical. So that whole transformation, I think a lot has been done in the back office, a lot has been done in the front office, but that connecting tissue needs to be brought into the 21st century.
And I couldn't agree more than that, right? So anybody that is doing technology today, your classical ESB, right? Your ability to actually, service-oriented architecture to anything and everything is the glue.
It's
right?
the glue.
It's the glue.
Workflow.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember doing SOA stuff in the 1990s and thinking, oh, isn't this really cool? And now it's like not really cool. It's like a mandate.
You got to get it done. So Enrique, what is your view in terms of Salesforce?
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time talking to, we all have these conversations, right? At the end of the day, a lot of our customers come to us and tell us, hey, okay, so what does it really take, right? Well, really, you got to tell me what are the things that I really need to do to make this work, right? So it's obviously the enterprise architecture and infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. But more and more, we're spending, at least in Latin America, our time talking about a couple things. One is getting to really dawn on the organization's perspective that, as you said, is not digital transformation, it's transformation overall. I think the word digital now, it's extra, right? It's sobra. And say, hey, listen, if you don't transform, you're going to have a very quick and painful death, right? Many companies are in that situation in Latin America right now because, the market context from which they come from. So once they understand that, then they say the only way you do this successful, and really thinking through all this, what I say is the three legs of the same stool is for this to work, you really have to think about three things. One is you absolutely have to do it customer centric, because I cannot tell you how many workshops or meetings I've been where, you're an hour into the workshop and the word customer hasn't even come up, right? And it's like, who's using this? Right? Who are we benefiting with all this, right? At the depth of, architecture or whatever. It's like, really think about making this customer centric. The second thing is it has to be user centric, right? So how do you spend your time? Because the other thing that our customers tell us, especially large scale transformation, is what's the impact that I'm going to have, in my workforce? Right? And I always get the question, is what percentage of my workforce am I going to have to fire? Right? And we're like, okay, I can tell you a number, but, if your question is about adoption, is, to make this successful is you have to also be user-centric, right? So those individuals are going to be using this tool, they're going to be using our solution.
Adoption.
They have to see benefit, right? They have to actually understand why they're using it. Likewise, I've been in meetings with customers that tell me, oh, my salespeople are just filling in the stuff in the app because someone's running our report. It's like, okay, obviously we're doing something wrong. And then the third thing is it starts at the top, right? If the C-suite is not really running their businesses in a digital way, right, and they're not using this to actually drive change in their organizations, we're kind of dead on arrival. So, and that's what it's all the time, right? It's so spending really time trying to get those two things because everybody knows it's pretty obvious, right? Like it's pretty obvious to say, oh yeah, sure, I need to think about customer and think about user, and actually need to lead by example. Great, but now get a CEO to stop their assistants from printing the report, right, and bring it to them, and actually get them to use their
Yeah.
oh wait, that's different,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's where we spend most of our energy doing those two things.
Interesting. So, how does the world of Lucky Martin looks like on this space?
So I think it was mentioned before in reference to IBM, right, being a 100-year company.
Right.
We too are a 100-year plus company. So as you can imagine, that's a very positive, but it also indicates a bit of tradition that continues to live on, especially with being the number one defense contractor in the world. Our primary customer is the Department of Defense, is the government. And if anyone has anyone here from the government, I don't usually think of speed with government, but I know they're trying to change that, right? So we're listening to our customer in the sense of certain departments are looking to digitize, to transform, and being our number one customer, that's an area we absolutely need to focus. On the second half, we're looking at Silicon Valley, we're looking at the SpaceXs, we're looking at all these other, if you will, smaller to mid-sized companies who are able to meet the legislative and regulatory requirements of the customer, of our defense customer, and we know that that's something that we're going to have to modify our ways to be able to match the speed, the agility, and the talent. Right? I think Enrique started hitting on some of the skill source, but making sure that from a top down, there's understanding from a leadership standpoint that we need to transform. There needs to be some level of digitization, but at the same point, and I could get into it and maybe some of the other questions, how a grassroots or from a bottoms-up perspective can also demonstrate to our leadership what that demand is for our employees and what they want to do on behalf of the corporation as well as the customer.
Very good. So I heard three things. The glue, right? Mm-hmm. How do you basically connect the new, the old, but really make sure that you have a cohesive approach, not just by accident, right? Not just implement whenever you need to or whatever. I'm talking about, on your side, you're talking about customer, you are talking about adoption, and you're talking about basically changing the way that we do things. And regulations and fiscal and legal requirements, and it varies from country to country, and that creates a myriad of actually complexities. Mm-hmm. But let's take this conversation now to how do you make it work? What are those pragmatic couple examples, right? So, I mean, for instance, if I go to you, Enrique, you guys have an interesting platform. It's called Force.com. Mm-hmm. Not Salesforce, not right? But Force.com. At least from my experience, Force.com has an interesting capability of creating very sophisticated workflows. It has the ability to actually accelerate a platform into a solution. So in our own environments, we have some of those examples, but the real question is, how do we land the idea of doing digitization at the top level? And what is your experience? Can you give me a couple examples to basically where you went, you found it, whether it was grassroots, whether it was whatever it was, right? But how or what can we share with this audience in terms of real pragmatic examples? And let's start with you, Miriam, on this one.
You want me to start?
Please, yes.
One of the things that is very on point with what you're asking is this whole employee experience that we've been talking about. And we agree, KPMG agrees that the employee experience needs to match the customer experience. Yeah. If not, you're going to have a huge disconnect in the way you're servicing your clients. So when we started looking at moving to the cloud and helping our clients move to the cloud, and I'm talking about sort of the first and second wave of moving to the cloud, right? So not just the, hey, let me get cheaper infrastructure and, but also let me start putting my apps and my data on the cloud so that I can have more efficient applications, less customization, et cetera. So when we started looking at that, we obviously are very focused in, we have a huge finance background, 125-year legacy of being auditors and accountants, of which I'm neither, by the way. But we work very closely with CFOs, and CFOs saying, IT's not doing it for me. They're not doing it fast enough. So we had a ton of processes that we had instantiated over the years into, all kinds of workflow tools, automation tools. And we said, wow, wouldn't it be great if we created a platform, an accelerator that would help the CFOs take their GL to the cloud. GL is like the last frontier for CFOs, of being, especially of Fortune 20 companies wanting to take their GL to the cloud is like, oh my God, really? Right? So we started building something we called KPMG Powered Enterprise, and I only name it not to plug us, but to answer your question, because we decided we needed to make that journey to the cloud as painless as possible, and therefore we needed to take all those many years of processes, across the finance landscape and the HR landscape, so pretty much the back office, and we needed to take those and put it into a tool that would then allow us to 80% be ready to accelerate going to the cloud on either HCM or the GL. And that tool has been incredibly helpful as we go with Oracle or SAP or Workday. It doesn't matter to us, right, which platform. As we go and help our clients move to the cloud, it becomes a much more business-led experience because there's a lot less hard coding that needs to be done, a lot more configuration. We already have the best-in-class processes that are instantiated in our tool that also match the software that these different vendors have. And then we help that and we accelerate it by a number of months and in cost. So that's one way we're trying to, and by the way, we've used it on ourselves in terms of we are upgrading many of our infrastructure applications, and we're using that same tool as a way to really accelerate the experience and bring real value in a shorter period of time.
Nice. Thank you, Miriam. So let's go with my friend here, Arjuna. Tell me your story.
So I'd like to give you an example.
Yes.
So Lockheed Martin is also on a journey right now to get into cloud. And as you can imagine, with our DFARS, or Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, it's kind of complicated to do that. But our CIO has been a proponent of digitization and kind of understanding the need, along with her peer CIOs, as well as the DoD CIO, as to how we can move into cloud. But I don't know the rest of my panel peers here, but moving to cloud is not just a matter of a lift and shift, right? It's really kind of a culture change, right? If you really want to benefit from cloud, you have to have individuals who have the skill sets, right? Full stack engineering, willing to take on just new paradigms of how you operate IT compared to your traditional, IT infrastructure and platforms today. So within our I2 organization, I run a labs kind of contingent. And for those who may have heard, I think it was Cesar Cruz who said, art should disturb the comfortable, right? And comfort the disturbed. And I'm not trying to say that we have any disturbed individuals, but really I take that as disrupt, right? We want to disrupt the comfortable, right? And comfort those who have been disrupted. And really being able to identify how IT can really start merging into the OT arena. So quick example, we had an engagement with our corporate engineering organization where they were trying at least 6 to 8 months through traditional IT mechanisms to be able to load up a particular software to run augmented reality. They came to my labs organization and said, could you do this for us? And I said, absolutely. When would you like it done? And they said, as soon as possible. And I said, okay, well, I can do it in 2 days. And she said I was full of it, except it wasn't it. It was something else.
Beep.
Yeah, beep. And but leveraging cloud, right? Leveraging modern processes, leveraging microservices and containerization technology, we were able to fulfill that in 2 days. And she was blown away. So now, from a corporate engineering perspective, she wants to engage IT in other really non-IT types of areas, and here we're able to demonstrate more value of IT through cloud and continuing on that journey.
At the end, part of our jobs is to make sure that we really understand the concept of time to value,
Mm-hmm.
the concept of adoption, the concept of true integration, the concept of real service-oriented architectures that helps the glue and all that, right? So if we look at you, Enrique, in terms of Salesforce, pragmatic example,
Yeah,
how do you do
I mean,
this?
there are a few. I think I can only build on what both Arjuna and Miriam said is, the concept of speed and the concept of change management, right? So, as you mentioned, Force.com, it allows you to do very complex things and workflows and all that kind of stuff, but also very quickly. So, concretely, when we built Lightning on top of our platform, it was thought about not only the user experience, but more importantly, speed to deployment.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're able to build an app on a modular way, it's just what we call clicks, not code. It's really fast, right? And allows. I mean, we have large customers, similar to what Arjuna was saying. That say, hey, I want to embark in this, and we have a customer in Chile that actually was looking at us. I can't name it yet, but they said, hey. This all sounds beautiful, but just prove it to us. And they had an event coming up that centered around pet adoption. And we were able to build in a couple of weeks an app to facilitate, the management and, the adoption process of the event that they were having, and they were just blown away. So we demonstrated speed. The change management, which is very the concrete aspect about change management is, and this is very motivated also, frankly, by our business model, is we have an entire organization that's built a very programmatic approach to help our customers manage change and drive adoption, right? And you have stuff from what we call accelerators, which are small programs around a particular issue that our customers are facing, to dedicated individuals, right, that will sit in a customer's office and basically be their FTE for a year or more, trying to help them drive change. So we developed all sorts of resources, programs, and expertise to help them drive that adoption, and to demonstrate to our customers that we have, I don't want to call it an answer, but we have an approach to solve each one of their problems depending on what the size and the magnitude of those are. So,
all of these great ideas, all of these concepts are not easy. If somebody thought that actually complexity is too hard, be comfortable being uncomfortable. That is the real thing to do in our jobs, right? So let me just take a quick survey here. Please raise your hand if you ever wrote code, programming, and this is very good, right? Nothing wrong with my friends that have never wrote a piece of code, right? Nothing wrong with that, right? It's like Sandfield. Nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing wrong.
You didn't say how long ago.
I think how long ago? Interesting. but you know what's interesting is that the higher we go in our organizations, that number is going to lower and lower and lower, and that's when you get the syndrome of, does the C-level get it? Mm-hmm. Not everybody needs to get it, but your CIO needs to get it. Your CTO, I mean, clearly you got to get it, right? So if you don't know how to, or how hard it is, or I don't know, so I'm gonna actually kind of say how old I am. How many of you have ever programmed in COBOL, CICS, JCL, right? Fortran. I mean, this is actually a long time ago. Object-oriented programming.
Long time ago, another life.
Object-oriented programming wasn't there, right? You had to basically develop every routine, every process. If you talk about the 90s, you look at this entire idea of client-server technology, these ideas of, PL SQL type of things. You see, we need to understand that technology requires architecture, and I'm very passionate about it. Whoever built this building, beautiful building, right, decided there are 3 doors and it's going to be in this dimension and the windows, right? Somebody architected this thing. Technology requires a true understanding on how you put it together. Once you invest on that, your velocity to transform happens. The problem is that we're not there. And that's the question for you guys. We live in a bimodal IT organization.
Mhm.
We live with the old and the new. With the guys that did COBOL and still have some of those systems out there, to the new generation right here from Cristo Gray, that probably you guys are going to be writing the latest stuff in JSON, and you're going to be basically creating some, Angular 4 websites that is really cool, right? But you will understand what a RESTful API is. You need to bring those two together. And the reality is, question now, how do you bring that realization of time to value and transformation to lead those ideas forward? So help me understand that, starting here from my friend Arjuna first.
Yeah, so you made a great point, right? Gartner's bimodal IT, right, from the, I don't want to call it old, but legacy,
Yeah.
to the more modern type of platforms, web-based and so forth. That's something we struggle with. I believe you mentioned we still have mainframe, right? Still
Right.
living strong.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
still need our mainframe operators. Right?
Harvey, it's there. It's there.
But the skill, not many people today wanting to learn mainframe, right? So it's a sustainment issue that you're in today. How do we continue to leverage mainframe, leverage those investments, while at the same time wanting to push into the newer technologies? I want to go back to my comment on more of a understanding the customer and the workforce, because I think between those two, we really have an opportunity to look at what are the customer drivers. Do we have an opportunity to influence what the customer thinks they want,
Yeah.
right? And at the same time, not impact our workforce in a way of, layoffs or, but using some of these individuals who have some of this legacy knowledge and develop them in a way to assist on working on these new modern platforms, right? The new college hires, partnering them from a mentorship perspective, right? Bringing them together so that there's some foundational knowledge that's being shared, but at the same time, some newer knowledge is being injected into our employee base. So, going back to your question, we definitely think that there's a fabric of collaboration, education, and overall looking towards the future and making sure that our employee base is really understanding our customer needs, but at the same time doing what's right from a company standpoint.
Very interesting. Miriam, you work for this amazing company, KPMG, that really influences leadership at the highest levels, right? What would be your recommendation to drive this level of transformation that is needed?
It's interesting because as Arjuna was talking about, the needs for the customer and for the employees, I was sort of in my mind going to sort of the C-suite
Right.
and what they think about in terms of stakeholder value, shareholder value, et cetera. But I was thinking about the incredible number of times I hear from Fortune 20 companies and the heads of business units, the heads of functions, how divided they are. So it's not just integrating the old and the new, I'll say it, because I'm on the old side, but it's also integrating the point of view of your customer across the entire enterprise, because a customer for one business unit is not necessarily the customer for another, especially in very complex and varied industries. And I think someone said earlier, maybe you did, about how industries are merging and morphing,
Right.
right? And you gave telecom, which is actually my background, and that's very, very true today, but it's also true in look at AWS. What are they doing? they're becoming a friggin' grocery store.
Oh,
You know,
oh
so
yeah.
I didn't say that word. I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
I just was in
Hold
a
on.
very intense conversation. It was beep
It was a beep.
grocery store, and not to say anything bad to AWS because I think it's a brilliant move, but I'm just saying I've been in very intense conversations. So this morphing of industries and changing, I think there is an incredible amount of, acknowledgement by the CEOs that they have to somehow get everyone on the same page. They have to optimize for the broadest expression of customer. But how do you do it when everyone is driving their own metrics in their own silos, which then just, makes the problem of technology even more complex. And I think there's a fundamental need, and someone said it earlier, from the top down to change out leadership, where leadership is not doing what it takes and leadership is not being a change agent. And you're seeing it in more of the progressive companies where they're taking out business unit leaders and giving them other roles, not necessarily getting rid of them, but putting more progressive thinking change agents into those roles. And so I think it is a crisis at the top. And I don't say crisis because, oh my goodness, it's doom and gloom, but I say crisis because it takes some pretty bold action to replace people who have been successful in their business area and say, you're successful now, but you're not planning for the future and you're actually holding us back.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I think to me, it's that necessary.
Nice. Let's go, Enrique. Quique, vamos.
Thanks. Well, clearly there's not one simple answer. It's an incredibly complex problem, but what I'll say is there's always one person I look around and I look for when we're having these conversations, and that I always go back and kind of pull aside and talk to him or her, and my team is a him, which is the enterprise architect. This is the guy, at least in my mind, this is the guy how you have to talk to. And they're really over-investing on the enterprise architecture. I think you mentioned it. I mean, it's at the end, this is great. I mean, you build a house, right? And
Right.
And we really push for the C-level to think about, what's the big house? What do you want to do? Think 20 years from now. What's the big transformational vision? But then you got to go and say, how are the pipes going to connect together?
Yeah.
Right? How do I make sure, the bathroom, in the guest unit doesn't flood? Because if that happens, then it's a bad experience for everybody. So that's an aspect that it's very easy to lose sight. And, the enterprise architect, in my mind, it's the lonely guy, usually an individual contributor, tends to be, somewhat professorial, right? But 12 of us that have a little bit of geek on us, I love those guys, and I really like to talk to them and say, hey, can we actually make this happen, right? And I always ask them, okay, now we got to slow down to go fast and really overinvest in really understanding, is the enterprise architecture in place? And if not, how do we make it work?
And they're always right.
Yeah.
They always are telling you what the issues are, and you're like, no. But they're usually right when you get down to it.
They tend to be because
Well,
they
their
see
incentive,
the big picture, right?
Yeah, they give picture,
big
and they're not. Their incentive basis is to be right. They don't want to sell fast, or they don't you pay them to know the answer,
Yeah.
Right.
and they will gladly tell you the answer even if you don't like it. And I like that.
Yes. So there is a moment of reflection here, I think, and I just want to go to the following, right? And it's probably a little bit diverging to this point of winning with technology innovation panel, but on the left, there's a word there that says HITEC, and HITEC is the Hispanic thing. First of all, I want to say we are all Americans. We love this country, melting pot, great talent. This is great talent that could be in any panel in the MIT symposium or anywhere else, and we happen to be Hispanic. And we're also bimodal. Podemos hacer esta conversación en español sin ningún problema. Podemos tenerla con todos los puntos de vista que quieran tenerlo. Hello, ¿me escuchan? No. I think I went down. No, o sea, realmente podemos tener esta conversación con el mismo nivel de tecnología, conocimiento, sofisticación, en todos los puntos de vista en español. And you got to own it, guys. Cristo Rey. You need to own this. Your culture is a strong platform for your success. We're Americans, right? We are the second largest Hispanic country in the world, the U.S. It's true. It's the second country around the world with all the Hispanics, right? I just wanted to reflect on that because I'm so proud for this panel today. The knowledge, the passion, the ability to actually transcend this content into a very good learning for all of you. So I want to open the floor. We'll actually get some questions going, please. We still have 7 minutes, and let's get it going. Kathy.
Thank you, Ricardo. You started the session saying that every business is digital. Halfway through, you mentioned that not everybody at the C-suite can code, yet they are our main business stakeholders, right? So we want to move from the basement to the boardroom and be influencers, and we want them to know that we need to be right there to enable that transformation. And that's a huge change. I want to ask your perspective on the change that needs to happen the other way around. We need to understand their mindset, and they talk in terms of earnings per share and growth and ROE. How do you see IT people understanding that to move from vanity metrics to value metrics so we can actually facilitate that transformation, making them understand that they do need us there? We do need to understand business a lot more.
No, we do. And great question, great point, right? So IT guys, you need to understand this. IT is freaking sexy today. It's sexy, right? So say it with me. IT is sexy, right? It is. Because if you're a chief information officer, you got to be also the chief innovation officer. You got to be able to actually get these ideas and get the jargon on one side, understand the value chain of your companies, understand those pain points, and translate them into value that you can monetize. They will understand money. They will understand EBIT. They will understand growth. So from my own experience, you guys have the accountability on your own to be a business person first. That's my view. So let me ask to you guys.
If I could, I find that doing some rotational assignments to be very basic now.
Yeah.
Either business people into IT, which is dangerous, but good. It is dangerous.
Anybody can code.
So they think. But also business, IT into business.
Yeah.
I know it's very simple, but that's what I've done my entire career. I've gone from having technical responsibilities to having business responsibilities. I even had a sales job once. And I would say that now, although I tell my clients all the time I'm not a salesperson because I'm not a trained salesperson, they go, yeah, right, Miriam. But I think having that kind of switch in your career, and you don't have to do it forever, but having that kind of mixed experience where you suddenly have to deliver results that are different than what you're used to delivering, I think is
cross-training.
Yeah, cross-training.
Do it. So let's hold that question and let's go to another question so we can get our panel to give us more flavors of knowledge here. Let's go right there.
So sorry, but in line with the last question, I think I resonated, Ricardo, with what you said. It's a value add proposition for each employee within an organization to show their value. And in that aspect, you're able to move up the chain and into different positions. We talked about impact, and we talked about the risks that are out there in the emerging space that we're in, and it's ever changing. How do you keep up with that space? We've got great feedback from these panelists, and I would really like to hear how you do that in your role today, because sometimes you can transition If you can, I think it's a great suggestion to do it. Sometimes some of us are tenured in our positions, are SMEs in our area.
Yeah.
And so and we love what we do, and we do it with probably a great group of people. And if you find that, I don't think you need to leave it. I think you need to foster that growth in other ways.
Yeah.
The other second question I have after that is the risk component. We talk about removing obstacles and speed to market. And I think one of those things is the lack of understanding of what that risk is and maybe the fear of what that risk may be. It's great to bring something to market. We talked about the healthcare industry and what that impact might be. I think from a technology standpoint, you need to understand risk.
Okay. So 2 questions right there. 1 answer from one of you guys. Let's take it with Arjun.
So I have background in risk from a cyber standpoint, but I definitely understand what your context is when we look at what's your risk tolerance, right? As an organization, as you can imagine, within Lockheed Martin, our risk tolerance is very thin, right? We're talking warfighter in the theater.
Yeah.
We're talking weapons platforms where, if we send a missile, east and it happens to accidentally go west, that would not be good, right? So absolutely, your point is spot on in regards to what's our tolerance. So I think one of the things that we're doing at least from an IT standpoint, right, is we understand what our programs and what our platforms, what their risk tolerance is. But from an IT standpoint, we may have a little bit more of a gap, right? Especially when you look at enterprise shared services and tooling and what it takes. So it kind of serves as a proving ground, right? To kind of say, hey, we were able to do it right here. Now we can go ahead and enable the program to leverage that same technology, knowing that we provided the due care, the due diligence, right, from an enterprise services standpoint. So that's just kind of a highlight from what we're trying to do from an IT standpoint and how we can apply it down to the program level.
So I don't think we have enough time for another question, but I would like to give the floor to Kike, Enrique, to give us what else would you add to all of this interesting conversation?
Say, nerds of the world, rejoice. This is our time.
It is our time, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you to my panel. Thank you so much.